Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to this. Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to this side event of the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, where we are going to discuss the realization of the SDG through building resilience in early childhood and ending violence against children. I am the UNICEF Regional Director for East Asia and Pacific, but UNICEF is only one of the key organizers today. This event is the result of our collaboration with also World Vision and ARNEC, and we have the honor to be joined also by a very special guest, Najat Mahalla. Hello, Najat. She's a special representative of the UN Secretary General on Violence Against Children. A very, very warm welcome. And we also have with us a group of brilliant youth advocates from countries in Asia and Pacific, and are also joined by the SAIEVAC Director General, who has been traveling, so I hope his connection will hold for this time we spend together. We are very happy to join forces and give space, amplify the voices of children and youth in Asia and Pacific, as they are key drivers to accelerate recovery from COVID-19 and to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development across the region. Next slide, please. Yes. Now in our region, Asia and Pacific, as you know, the pandemic has reversed progress, has widened inequities on many fronts, including in the areas of early childhood development and ending child labor of at-risk children. And then climate change emergencies, disasters, environmental degradations, gender and disability discrimination will only worsen these inequities unless we take action, unless we take very urgent action. In keeping with the theme of the Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development this year, our side event has a special focus on SDG 17 on partnership. And we will showcase diverse voices of children and youth in Asian Pacific as we celebrate their agency, we celebrate their solutions to realize the SDG. And two key agendas will get the spotlight: the South Asia Initiative on Ending Violence Against Children, SAIEVAC, to protect the rights of vulnerable children so that none is left behind in achieving SDG 11 and SDG 17, and also resilience building in early childhood by supporting the youngest children and their families as a fundamental tool for building community resilience and boosting also long-term impact across all the sustainable development agenda. And let us now dive into the agenda guided by Ana Maria. Over to you, Ana Maria.
Thank you, Deborah, and welcome everyone. So we're just gonna go for a very quick overview of our session today, which is very, very exciting. We just had a very warm welcome by Deborah Comini, our Regional Director for UNICEF Eastern Pacific Regional Office. We are going to have some special remarks by our SRSG on violence against children, Najat Mahalla. And we're gonna have some really interesting framings that are going to be shared with us by Adrián Cerezo, who is our Senior Advisor at ARNEC on ECD and climate change, and Rinchen Chapel from SAIEVAC, who's the Director General of SAIEVAC. After that, we're going to have a very exciting youth-led dialogue on these pressing issues, and then we're going to have some closing remarks. Next slide, please. So let me just start by introducing our great speakers of the first part of our virtual side event today. And we are going to start with our SRSG, as we already mentioned, Najat Mahalla, who's going to share with us some special remarks. And then we have Rinchen Chapel, Cherian Thomas, and Adrián Cerezo, who are going to share with us their perspectives as well, and they will guide us also through this really interesting conversation we're about to experience. So over to you, SRSG. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Greetings from Reykjavik when I just arrived, and we will discuss also about, child protection. So Distinguished delegates, dear children and youth participants, dear friends and colleagues, it's really a pleasure to join you for today's discussion on realizing the SDGs through building resilience in early childhood and ending violence against children. I would like to thank UNICEF, World Vision, and the Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood for the kind invitation to attend. The discussion is very timely. As highlighted by Deborah, children's vulnerability to violence continues to be exacerbated worldwide by the impact of the pandemic and the multiple and overlapping crises, including, among others, increasing poverty, food insecurity, social and economic inequalities, conflicts, and the climate crisis. The urgency to end violence against children requires a boost to our collective efforts, translating good intentions into concrete and sustained action. Against this background, I would like to share 4 key messages. First, safety and protection are a prerequisite for early childhood development. As a pediatrician myself, I know how crucial a protective, safe, nurturing, and caring environment is to ensuring children's good development and well-being and sense of belonging. The human brain develops wider and faster during the first 1,000 days of life than at any other stage. Children in early childhood are particularly vulnerable in situations of inequality, crisis, instability, and violence. Nurturing and protective care is essential for holistic development and well-being of children in the early years. Unfortunately, it is not the case for many children due to the impact of the multiple and ongoing crises they face. From an early age, too many children are experiencing more and more forms of harm and violence in all settings. From an early age, too many children are facing more and more extreme poverty, discrimination, and social inequalities. From an early age, too many children are more and more affected by forced displacement due to conflicts, climate crisis, widespread violence, and food insecurity. Second message, exposure to violence and stress during early childhood has a lifelong impact. How children are cared for in the first years of their lives can affect brain function for the rest of their lives and may even affect future generations. The science is clear. Without nurturing and protective care, stimulation, including consistent, responsive adult relationship and opportunities to learn and explore, the future for children is black. Children who experience stress and violence in their early years are at greater risk for developing cognitive, behavioral, and emotional difficulties, which also reduce and delays their overall developmental processes. Exposure to violence is often traumatic, and it can evoke toxic responses to stress that cause both immediate and long-term physiological and psychological damage. The data shows that adults who experience more childhood adversities, including physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, are more likely to be involved in interpersonal violence as a victim or perpetrator and more likely to attempt suicide. Violence and adverse childhood experiences also have a severe economic cost. A poor start in life can lead to a loss of about a quarter of average adult income per year. In addition, as outlined in the 2020 Global Status Report on Preventing Violence Against Children in East Asia and the Pacific, the economic costs of the consequences of child maltreatment equate to between 1.4% and 2.5% of the region's annual gross domestic product. Investing in cross-sectoral violence prevention and protection services for all children from an early age, leaving no one behind, is needed more than ever. My third message, investing in children means also involving them as part of the solution. I draw great hope and inspiration from the action of children themselves worldwide. Even during these challenging times, children's resilience, activism, and sense of solidarity are remarkable. Worldwide, children and young people are already taking action to address violence against children. They are constantly finding ways to build knowledge, express opinions, engage with and support peers, and create networks, especially through the use of ICTs. My mandate has undertaken a mapping of initiatives undertaken with and by children to learn more about how they are engaging in the world and contributing to positive change, including through peer-to-peer action and support. Given their role, their key role, children must continue to be empowered as part of the solution in ending violence against children and achieving the whole SDGs. My last message: the clock is ticking. Less than 7 years remain to keep our promise by 2030. There is no time to waste. We need to ensure a protective, safe, inclusive, nurturing, and caring environment, adopting a life cycle approach starting in early childhood. We must strengthen and scale up integrated cross-sectoral systems that include birth registration and documentation, child-sensitive social welfare protection and care services, safe, inclusive, and empowering education, including quality early childhood education and safe digital learning, good nutrition, as well as physical, mental, sexual, and reproductive health services, child and gender-sensitive justice, parenting and family support, sustainable social protection for vulnerable families and communities, and promoting protective social norms. The case for investment is made even stronger by the fact that many proven interventions have a low cost. Even modest increases in spending on these services can make a substantial difference, especially in early childhood. And this can make all the difference to the current and to future generations. Dear participants, I look forward to learning from the contributors to today's discussion, most especially the child and youth participants. You can count on my ongoing support as we seek to accelerate action to build children's resilience and to end the violence they face worldwide. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, SRSG, for these very inspiring remarks. We're so happy and honored to have you here today to be part of this great discussion. Thank you, thank you. All right, next slide, please. We will now share with all of you a short video that has been developed by ARNEC, the Asian Regional Network for Early Childhood, in partnership with Save the Children and UNICEF, that summarizes the critical role of ECD on building resilience of young children and their families to address the climate crisis.
Supporting young children is a smart investment and should be placed at the forefront of the fight against climate change. Young children aged 0 to 6 are the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, but they are also the most valuable group in the fight against it. Well-financed, high-quality and equitable early childhood programs create immediate impact and ensure the long-term success of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Investment in early childhood accelerates progress towards all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Young children are more affected by the impacts of climate change and large-scale environmental degradation than any other group. Air pollution, disease, forced migration, and extreme weather events like heat waves, flooding and drought affect young children directly. They create toxic stress, disrupting children's brain development, their long-term physical and mental health, and cognitive abilities. This can lead to chronic problems that will be carried by the individual, the community, and a nation throughout the life of that young child. Young children may be the most vulnerable, but they are also the most valuable. High-quality early childhood development programs support children's potential to build healthy, well-educated, socially and emotionally competent, peaceful, and resilient communities throughout their lives. Policies and programs that support healthy early childhood development are therefore one of the most effective interventions for a better future. They provide a cost-effective, comprehensive, immediate and enduring path to achieving sustainable development in communities. By increasing climate knowledge in early childhood development settings and by building strong relations between policymakers and the climate science community, we can realize the full potential that early years development has in addressing the effects of climate change. Systems and services for young children need to become more climate resilient. To make this happen, they need to be adequately funded and their value better understood both by policymakers and climate scientists. Funding for climate change mitigation and adaptation must allow financing of early childhood development programs. We need to see early childhood development as a key to addressing climate change. We want your help. Learn more about how to support early childhood development as a fundamental and cost-effective tool in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Help us connect policymakers, practitioners, and climate scientists. Together, we can create practices, systems, and policies that protect young children from the effects of climate change now and make their societies sustainable in the future. Early childhood development is crucial to achieving all of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, I would now like to introduce our next panelist, Adrián Cerezo. Adrián is our senior advisor for ARNEC and ECDAN on ECD and climate change. Adrián, over to you. Thank you for being here today.
Greetings. It's such an honor to be here today and be able to speak to you about such an important topic. Next slide, please. What I'm going to try to do today is provide some framing for this discussion about resilience and early childhood development. And I want to also introduce you to a concept that we have been working on for the last few years. In thinking about climate change and early childhood development, we have realized more and more that what we're doing in connecting early childhood development and climate change is creating almost a proof of concept of the fundamental and cross-cutting role of early childhood development in sustainable development. Next slide. In order to do that, I would like to begin this framing by addressing a topic that I think is fundamental in understanding this connection. When we think about early childhood or young children, we tend to think about a little boy, a little girl, an individual little boy and an individual little girl. But we have known for decades, since the beginning of the 1970s, Urie Bronfenbrenner proposed a different way of looking at early childhood development as the expression of a complex network. Next slide. This complex network includes several subsystems. Clearly, a key part of that network is the child himself or herself. Next slide. But human babies are not autonomous for many years. And so they are embedded in and need the support of their direct family or their direct caregivers and the community of care or the circle of care that surrounds them in order to survive and thrive. Next slide. And that relationship between the family and the child is connected to the larger relationship between the child, the family, the caregivers, the sociocultural setting, the economic setting, and the ecologic setting. When we talk about early childhood development, there is a direct, strong connection, especially in the youngest years of life, between what happens to the surrounding ecosystem and what happens to that individual child and that family. Next slide. So we're talking about multiple subsystems, which we refer to them as intrapersonal, interpersonal, sociocultural, and ecologic. Next slide. But that is not the only feature of that network. When we think about that network, we also have to realize that, especially in the youngest years, we're talking about a network that is dynamic, that evolves through multiple stages. The latest research points to events that happen in the adolescence of the potential parents that determine the epigenetic makeup and what happens to the social, emotional development of children. So when we think about the stages of early childhood development for developmental scientists, it begins with the adolescence of the parents, and of course the pregnancy and the perinatal period, infancy, and so on until 7 to 9 years. I specifically focus in the context of early childhood and climate change on the first 1,000 days, so 0 to the first 1,000 days, because there are particularities to this moment in life that are very determinant in what is going to happen to both the child and that whole network of early childhood development and the trajectory of life. Next slide. And beyond the network that attends to the child and this evolution over time, there are multiple dimensions of care that come into play in the moment of early childhood development. So this is one of the ways in which we categorize these dimensions of care. It's called the nurturing care framework. And in this framework, the 5 dimensions that are highlighted are health, nutrition, safety and security, parental care or quality parenting, and early stimulation. You will see that there is a lot of correspondence between these dimensions and the Sustainable Development Goals. That is not an accident. Next slide. So what I want is for you to now think of a child as that dynamic, complex system of early childhood development, because it answers a question that we get often asked: how are young children connected to climate change? How are young children connected to sustainable development? The answer is, we have always been connected. We have always been inextricably linked to what happens in the environment. And it is even more so for young children than it is for other individuals, because what is happening at that moment in life is not that you are just helping people survive or do well. You are also building the architecture of the person they are going to become cognitively, in terms of health, in terms of nutrition, in terms of risk of violence, in terms of so many things that, again, you are probably realizing are very tightly connected with the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is a moment in life. This network, this dynamic, complex system is the expression of this tight connection that has always existed between that moment in life and the rest of the world, the rest of society, the rest of the economic system. Next slide. So now I want to bring you to the topic of climate change. Next slide. And I don't need to restate what has already been said. Young children are, individual young children are particularly vulnerable to the effects and damages and displacements and disruptions and emergencies caused by climate change, because they are very dependent on what is happening in the ecosystem. They are very dependent on what is happening to their parents and their caregiving circle. They are going to experience the damage and the disruptions in a way that is that makes them the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. So next slide. So when you activate all of the disruptions and damages that are connected to climate change, you are also activating trajectories of risks. And this is really important to know. And this is what intuitively we understand and what we talk about very often when we talk about early childhood and climate change. Next slide. But what I want to talk to you about today is the other side of that question. Because of that inextricable connection between early childhood development and that network of early childhood development and the rest of the world, when we do the work that we are supposed to do in promoting quality early childhood development and make sure that all of those dimensions of care are attended to, where children are well nourished, they are healthy, they have appropriate parenting, they are safe and secure, and they have early stimulation. Next slide. What we do is we activate trajectories of potential. Next slide. So in summary, policies and programs focused on early childhood development provide cost-effective, comprehensive, immediate, and enduring paths to achieving both human potential and well-being, which we know and we intuitively know. The better we care for those young children, the better they will do. But it reports to the community because it adds measures and capacities and resilience in the individuals that make the whole community more resilient, more climate resilient. So you're also activating a trajectory of adaptation, a trajectory of climate resilience. And this is particularly important right now in view of the last Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change synthesis report. Next slide. Where we are talking about a level of emergency and a level of concern where we can not anymore make decisions about supporting one thing and abandoning another. In the words of the Secretary General last week, our world needs climate action on all fronts. And then citing the title of this recent movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Interventions in early childhood development are a way of achieving this everything, everywhere, all at once, because as you are affecting the lives of young children in the kinds of programs that support early childhood development, you are activating multiple returns on investment. Next slide. But in order to do that, it is not just a matter of understanding the value of it. One permanent concern that was brought up already about the importance of about the care of young children is that it has been chronically undersupported and underfinanced for decades. We have to begin with adequate financing to unlock the transformational role of ECD programs so that, next slide, they have the characteristics that make them successful, which is that they have to be equitable, they have to be of high quality, and they have to be delivered in the right time in life. Because a breastfeeding program is of very little use when a child is 4 years of age. It has to be supported and delivered at the right time in life. Early stimulation needs to happen at the right time in life. Health programs that prevent chronic disease over the lifespan need to be delivered at the right time in life. And so all of these things need to be supported so that we can do them and truly deliver on the promise of early childhood development. But there's more. Next slide. There is a compounded return on the investment. Next slide. When we actively think about the intertwined nature of early childhood development and sustainable development. And so part of the research I've been doing and my team at the University of Maine and in collaboration with ARNEC, ECDA, and UNICEF Pacific is this way in which early childhood development is intertwined with the Sustainable Development Goals and trying to build programs and policies that are ever more aligned with environmental and sustainability principles. Next slide. Because for early childhood to deliver on its promise of sustainable future, Programs must be well-financed, high quality, equitable, and delivered at the right time, and be ever more aligned with the principles of environmental, climate, and sustainable development policy. Next slide. When we do that, we need to activate a third, we activate a third return on investment, which is we activate the movement towards sustainable development. And this is what the thesis of this presentation, that what we're learning in climate is helping us understand this relationship with sustainable development as a whole. And particularly today, we're talking about Sustainable Development Goal 11. Next slide. But in order for that to happen, we need to build stronger intersectoral collaborations with environmental, wildlife, and sustainable development institutions, because these silos that we work in don't help us build the kind of interdisciplinary interventions that are necessary. Next slide. Finally, I would like to repeat the words that were said at the beginning in 2015 by Ban Ki-moon. The Sustainable Development Goals recognize that early childhood development can help drive the transformation we hope to achieve over the next 15 years. He said this in the context of how is ECD connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have to keep this in mind in order to make the most and deliver on the promise of this connection between early childhood development and sustainable development. Next slide. Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Adrian, as always, for your very inspiring and thoughtful presentations and remarks. I would like now to introduce Vincent Chappell, who is SAIEVAC Director General and UNCRC Committee member. He's here with us from a beautiful place, and he's going to share some thoughts with us. Vincent, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hoping that my net will keep up. I'm on a hillside somewhere in the Eastern Himalayas. I'm driving home after a flight from Kathmandu. I'm driving to my village for a family religious ceremony. So I had to stop here where there was some opportunity for a stable net. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I am very honored to be part of this august speakers who have already, particularly Deborah, Najat, and Andrea, Adrian, who have already made their statements and created the ground on which then I think I can build on in terms of what is required. Now, the issues, challenges related to the work we have to do is already on the ground. The work that is being done, what more needs to be done, and of course, like Adrian said, everything, everywhere, all at once, I think is something that is become even more real now, with just 7 years left for the SDGs to, mature, and so much more to be done as yet. Now, for me, I believe you'd like to hear a little more about the SAIEVAC as an institution and how SAIEVAC actually ensures that children and young people are brought on board and how we carry the process forward. Now, SAIEVAC, as you know, is called the South Asia Initiative to End Violence Against Children. And it was inspired by the 2001 UN Secretary General's global study on violence against children. And SAIEVAC is the South Asia's response to the global study, and it got on the ground since 2005 when the South Asian segment of the studies were presented. And I have been involved right from the start. And I continue to be involved in taking this platform forward. Now, why this platform was created was that the regional study that contributed to the global study clearly identified that in South Asia, there were a number of issues that contributed to making violence against children much more, complicated. And it actually expanded the need to, understand violence as not just corporal punishment or physical abuse, but also include everything that actually contributes towards that, setting. So the regional study identified root causes, which included such as poverty, social norms, lack of awareness, discrimination, social exclusion, emergencies, and identified early marriage, sexual abuse and exploitation, trafficking, child labor, corporal punishment as 5 commonest forms of violence against children in South Asia. And one of the reasons why this is so rampant in South Asia, please forgive me for the use of word rampant, was because of the fragile child protection systems in place in the region, and also because of the insufficient focus on prevention and lack of systematic response to child protection issues. So this was the reality within which the regional intergovernmental process contributed by UN NGOs and civil society and children together in 2005 in Islamabad, Pakistan, decided that the South Asia needs a response to tackle violence against children. And that's how SAIEVAC was born. Now, SAIEVAC actually started with one overall objective, which is to provide better protection for children in South Asia, especially children at risk from all forms of violence. And then 2 specific objectives were selected. One was that children are better protected through functioning comprehensive child protection systems set up at the regional and national levels and enhanced through regional cooperation and networking. And 2, government, civil society, and children formalize linkages to better cooperate, share experiences, and learning for increased impact on ending violence against children. So these were the basis on which the institution was created. And I had the honor and privilege of setting up this institution. And what we did was at the regional level, we created an institutional mechanism whereby we had representation from governments of all the 8 countries. Then we had the civil society networks created, which is referred to today as the NACGs, the National Action and Coordinating Group for Ending Violence Against Children. Then we had the children's forums, regional and national, created. And then the SACG, which is the South Asia Action and Coordinating Group for Ending Violence Against Children, which has all the UN NGO collaborating development partners working on children put together on a platform. And the governing board of SAIEVAC was created by bringing representation from all these platforms. So the governing board of SAIEVAC has all the 8 governments. We have 4 children selected on a rotation of the 8 countries alphabetically, 2 as full-fledged, a boy and girl, and 2 as observers who come and observe for 1 year and then graduate in the next session as full-fledged board members. Then we have the chair of the SACG as a governing board member. We have 4 NACG, civil society representatives, 2 full-fledged and 2 as observers. And all the board members, including child and civil society, have equal voting rights as the government board members. So that's at the regional level. And then at the regional level, we have this cross-connect with the global entities like the UN SDGs office, the Human Rights Council, then with treaty body mechanisms like CRC, CEDAW. And then at the national level, we have what is called the national mechanisms. The national mechanisms consists of government mechanism and the NACG mechanism and children's forums. So therefore, one of the things that we made sincere and dedicated effort was to ensure that all stakeholders, including children, have equal responsibility in terms of driving this movement forward, and also hold equal accountability in terms of issues and challenges that we need to tackle on the ground. The 5 thematic areas which I referred to all have 3 cross-cutting themes. One is your gender, disability, and child participation as cross-cutting themes. So for any of the thematic areas, we have to ensure that these 3 cross-cutting themes have to be addressed judiciously. Now, SAIEVAC has over the years addressed through a collective mechanism and effort number of these thematic areas, and we have produced regional action plans through collective effort, and these regional action plans have now gone through series of reviews and continue to drive the agenda in South Asia. Now, focusing on children and young people, and I think that's one of the more crucial issues that we are looking forward to discuss. Every SAIEVAC's regional or thematic consultations that we hold is always preceded by a children's consultation first. And then children participate with the regional, adult consultations. And we have pursued that very diligently in the beginning. But as funding and resource crunch became a major challenge, we had to then find compromises where we had to reduce the frequency or the way we consulted children by bringing everybody on a face-to-face basis. So now during the COVID phase, and with this whole online opportunities for consultation, we have had series of consultations with children on various issues related to the SAIEVAC thematic areas, on the COVID experiences, on coping mechanisms by children during COVID. And then as the COVID opened up to more normalization, then we started ensuring that there is an opportunity to also create face-to-face discussions with children in terms of the issues we are discussing. And SAIEVAC had the opportunity of bringing the first in-person consultation, regional consultation in December 2022 on child labor. And the SACG, led by World Vision, actually spearheaded the children and young people's consultation. And we had children from Nepal who actually joined the adults and all the senior delegates who came to the consultation. And all other children then joined online through a hybrid mechanism and contributed towards the discourse at the regional level when we were reviewing the regional action plan to end child labor. And that regional action plan to end child labor is now moving forward and will be presented in July when the SAIEVAC's 9th governing board meeting will be held. Now, in between, we are hoping that we will be able to, hopefully things will materialize to consult children separately on the output of the December consultation where children produce their own recommendations for the regional action plan and how the regional action plan should be, improved or revamped in terms of, making it more sensitive and effective. So this is what we intend to do. We hopefully will succeed in doing that. But the important element is that we make sincere efforts to consult children, involve children in the work that SAIEVAC is carrying out. And today I'm very happy that Prenusa Pandey is present in the forum. She is currently the serving SAIEVAC governing board member representing Nepal on the SAIEVAC governing board. The boy child is from Maldives, and they will continue till till July, when the 9th governing board meeting takes place. And then the children from Sri Lanka and Pakistan will assume full-fledged board members, and Afghanistan and Bangladesh will then be brought on board as observers. So this is basically how SAIEVAC functions. And SAIEVAC is a platform where everybody actually has big, small, large, any entity who has an interest in driving the violence against movement in South Asia forward. Now,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rinchen. If I may interrupt, in the interest of time and understanding that we still have our youth that will be sharing with us, we would need to, if it's okay, maybe close your remarks so we can move forward, please. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. It's okay. I covered SAIEVAC. I actually thought I'll touch a little bit on the CRC part, but that's okay. We can do it later.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your flexibility. And that's actually, you gave us a great institutional framework and segue into our next part of our side event, which is a video that we want to share with you from World Vision and its partners, the ILO, the South Asia Coordinating Group on Action Against Violence Against Children, South Asia Initiative to End Violence Against Children, and the National Action and Coordinating Group Against Violence Against Women and Children. And this video presents 9 recommendations on ending child labor and was formulated by 69 children and youth aged 14 to 24 years old across South Asian countries. So let's play the video, please. Thank you.
Namaste.
Assalamu alaikum.
Vanakkam.
Hello everyone.
என் நாட்டுல சிறுவர்கள் அதிகமாகவே தொழில் புரிவதை நான் பார்க்கிறேன். அவங்க மிகவும் அபாயகரமான தொழிற்சாலை வேலைகளில் எல்லாம் ஈடுபடுறாங்க.
In my country, children engaged in agriculture hard labor.
In my country, children are engaged in abusive domestic work.
In my country, children are engaged in exploitative entertainment work.
In my country, children are engaged in risky street-based works like begging.
Child labor steals a child's futures
and stops them from dreaming bigger.
அது அவர்களுடைய ஆரோக்கியம், பாதுகாப்பு என்பவற்றை தடுக்குது.
And they don't get to be the best versions of themselves.
தெற்காசியாவில் மட்டும்
There are 50 million children
engaged in child labor.
We, as children, want to do something about this.
In fact, we are already doing something for this.
Over 60 child representatives from the 7 South Asian countries
Recently came together in a consultation
to discuss solutions to child labor in our region. Ending child labor.
ஒரு விழிப்புணர்வை ஏற்படுத்த தொடர்பான ஒரு நடவடிக்கை எடுக்கிறது பத்தி.
Then elimination of poverty.
After getting quality education.
நீதியை පිළිබඳ ළමම් දැනුවත් කිරීම.
And here are some of the actions that we urgently call for.
Government and non-government organizations
to actively support the prevention of child labor.
More platforms and places should be created for the children
to discuss issue of child labor directly with the government authorities
and be involved in the decision making as well.
Every country must have a well-functioning child helpline.
பாடசாலைகளில் இடைநிறுத்தப்பட்டவர்களை மீண்டும் பள்ளியில் சேர்ப்பதற்கு ஒவ்வொரு பள்ளியும் முன் வர வேண்டும்.
Every child and every parent must be taught the importance of education.
School curriculum should include financial literacy.
There should be a system to support families who struggle economically,
including access to and continuous support for vocational capacity build-up.
ஒவ்வொரு ஊடகமும் சிறுவர் தொழிலாளர்களுக்கு எதிராக குரல் கொடுக்க வேண்டும்.
Every child must be taught the harmful effects of child labor.
And all children must rally for against child labor.
Ending child labor is everyone's business.
No one should ignore it.
எந்த ஒரு வேலைத்தளத்திலும் சிறுவர்களுக்கான காலியிடங்கள் இருக்கவே கூடாது.
Because no child
is ever
old enough to work.
Thank you for sharing this, and I think it speaks for itself. So we've been hearing about challenges in the Asia Pacific region that children face on violence and in increased vulnerability starting in early childhood before primary school age due to worsening inequities exacerbated by COVID-19, compounded by climate change, emergencies, and disasters. But with challenges come unique opportunities. Children and youth are fundamental agents of change and valuable contributors to meaningfully participate in decisions that affect them into the future. Today, we have a unique opportunity to learn from each other, particularly from the young people who are here with us to share their knowledge and experiences. Let me present them and introduce them to you. We have 4 youth with us today. We have Abdullah Ludin from Afghanistan, World Vision Children and Young People. Prenusa Pandi from Nepal, who has been introduced already by Richan, and she's Child Governing Board member from SAIEVAC. We have Alisi Rabukawaka Nasewa from the Pacific, from our Climate Change Warriors organization, and Erwin Mahendra Ekasaputra from Indonesia, from the UNICEF Young People's Action Team. So let's just dive into our conversation today. Welcome. We're super happy to have you guys here today with us, and we're looking forward to learn from all of you. I'm going to pose the first question. Abdullah, this is for you. You're here. So if you can please turn on your camera. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. Can you please highlight some existing solutions or good practices in eliminating child labor? Over to you, Abdullah. We might have maybe experiencing some connectivity issues.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say, do you guys hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead, loud and clear.
Okay. So, do you guys hear my voice actually? And
we can hear your voice.
Would it be good if I turn off my camera?
Yes, that would be great.
It also affects the internet.
Yes, Abdullah, please turn off your camera.
I mean, like, is it going to be okay if I turn off my camera?
Yes, Abdullah, it should be okay.
Yeah.
Please turn off your camera. No problem.
Okay. Yeah, I just turned it off. So the question was, yeah, I guess, yeah, I already did that. It's beyond 2030. How can we ensure that wrong? Was that the question, right?
Yes, Abdullah, we are actually hearing you very, very regularly. Would it be okay if we try to move on to our next panelist and question, and then we'll come back to you in a little bit and see if we can fix the connectivity problems. Is that okay? Can you hear me? Yes, I think maybe we should do that. We're still struggling in these virtual spaces, and these things happen sometimes. But thank you for your patience, and if it's okay, then we can just move on to our second youth, Pranusa Pandi.
Yeah, sure. I can hear you clearly. You said, do you hear me?
No, I'm sorry. We're going to try to connect with you bilaterally while we move on to Pranusa. Thank you for being here, Pranusa. And our question to you is the following. In your context of South Asia, what are the role of partnerships in ending child labor to reach SDG 11 of building sustainable, healthy, and resilient communities?
Let me directly dive into the topic. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development represents a transformative framework to stimulate international movement to end poverty and hunger for building an inclusive and sustainable world. Encompassing 17 sustainable goals and 169 associated targets, the ambitious agenda, a historic opportunity to make the development more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable to end extreme poverty and provide a life of dignity to all within a generation. It is of particular relevance of South Asia, a region accounting for 36% of the world's poor and nearly half of undernourished children. There is continuously an association with each concerned specialist in ARNEC to get the particular objectives. Additionally, in case of ending child labor, ensuring the support of distinctive body will grasp to decrease the number of child labor. Following are the roles which can be played by the partners in ARNEC to conclude child labor to reach SDG 11 of building sustainable, healthy, and resilient community. Number 1 point, monitoring the labor for prohibiting the employment of children who are under 14 years. Similarly, regulation to protect children from involving in any entertainment sector. Likewise, prohibiting children the use or procuring of a child for prostitution for the productions of pornography. And lastly, incorporating it in laws and regulations, due consultations with employers and workers, organizations review and revised periodically. There must be some prerequisites if an employer would like to involve children in safer environment. That must be the consent from parents and children by the employer to submit certificate of qualification which is valid for a year, including medical tests to concerned labor office, and child labor inspections and labor audits in factories. There might be some risk factors where children might face, and child welfare association must be there in order to rescue them for the arranging some necessary services and reunite the child with his or her family. There might be the risk factors we might face are lack of the knowledge about the child rights and the risks of child labor, presence of harmful practices and traditions, limited access to decent work opportunities. These risk factors must be monitored periodically by the child welfare associations. I too have enlisted some of the points in order to enrich the contribution for reducing child labor. The points are listed as below, like sensitizing parents and guardians on the risks around child labor, worrying about the benefits of children when they are not in child labor, as well as encouraging them to realize the value of child protections and education at the same time. Number 2 point, strengthening local level child labor monitoring mechanism to monitor the situations and mobilize the community against child labor. Number 3, conducting studies and situational analysis on various aspects of child labor, and by sharing the results, use them as tools of advocacy with the concerned agency of government. Likewise, developing strategic networks and alliances for advocating with the government for ensuring child protections and eliminating child labor, initiating campaign to advocate against the WFCL and to strengthen the monitoring mechanism capacities within the agency at local level, as well as the work with local levels to develop strategic plan to address child labor, supporting to children's agency, that is child club, to engage in raising awareness among children and their families against child labor and participate in the efforts made by local level authority. And lastly, promoting learning and sharing of experiences of practices, innovative approaches to address the issues of child labor within and amongst all the concerned line department and agencies. I have enlisted these points, and pretty sure that if we regulate these points accordingly, we might get away in order to end child labor to some extent. So that's all. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, Pranusa, and thank you for your passion and for the great work you're doing. And this is very well noted and very well heard. Let us go over to Alisi, our champion from the Pacific Warriors. Let me ask you the following question. In the Pacific, how are young children and youth championing the call to build community resilience starting in early childhood, given increasing intensity and frequency of climate change emergencies? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you as well to the organizers for this opportunity to come and speak with you all. I think the first point that I want to make is that to recognize the efforts of young Pacific children and youth in championing and practicing community resilience, given the increasing intensity and frequency of climate change emergencies, is also to recognize the effort of our elders and leaders in our communities, in our governments, as well as acknowledge the history of the climate movement in the region as we continue to fight for a better future. As an example, last month, I had the opportunity to facilitate a panel of 3 young children, ages 5, 7, and 9. Dr. Adrian was there as well. It was the Pacific Early Childhood Development Forum, led by the Pacific Regional Council for Early Childhood Development, of which UNICEF is the secretary, and hosted by the Fiji government. So while I can say as an example that our young children are already becoming advocates in this space, it's made possible because our leaders recognize the importance of journeying together. Our experts in this space value the participation of children in discussions about children, and our partners support these localized efforts. And so this is how we are moving in this space. You know, there's also no shortage of examples on the plethora of work that Pacific youth engage in locally, regionally, and internationally. Within my network, the Pacific Climate Warriors, and maybe just to point out as well that we volunteer our time to be part of this network. We actually have just regular day jobs, and then this is what we volunteer our time for to do. One of our goals has always been to ensure that, you know, a just and safe future for our children and our children's children. And the way that manifests, you know, that local solutions work, it manifests in multiple ways. I listed out a few, like one, we have the advocates, the ones that you see sharing knowledge, information, conducting trainings, creating this community for those who come in, including young. You know, these are the ones who are translation into local languages, into context for those that may not easily grasp the way in which these technical concepts are presented. And then we have what we call the boots on the ground. You know, this is like the most visible, or the one that people always ask about. Well, what are you actually doing, you know? And this can also be made up of those in the first and second list that I mentioned, you know, that show up, that show communities how to practice resilience. There are many ways you think of examples of those who do cleanup campaigns, pick up rubbish, plant mangroves. Our warriors have also been part of what we call this Solar Scholars Training, where we worked with 350 in the Philippines to conduct these trainings and teach communities how to build their own solar packs in their communities using existing materials and tools. Regionally, there are other ways in which we engage, reaching out across regions that I just mentioned, like with 350 Philippines, and also what we're doing right now within this space on what we can learn about what's being done to build resilience and how we can ensure it's done in a way that that is accompanied, that brings our little brothers and sisters and our children along with us. And then when you look at a global scale, the most current example I could give is right now you have the UNGA happening, and they're all awaiting a decision to be made on a campaign first initiated by 27 law students from the University of the South Pacific in 2019. And it was taken up by the Vanuatu government and has since received, all of this support and groundswell from governments, regional organizations, and civil society. And it's a push for the International Court of Justice to provide an advisory opinion on climate change. And so, I'm just like giving a quick rundown of all of the ways in which children and youth are engaging in multiple spaces and trying to continue to do this important work because, as initially asked, we're trying to build resilience and we're also recognizing the increasing intensity and frequency of climate emergencies. So it only intensifies our efforts as well in this space. And, we continue to employ every tool at our disposal to fight on multiple fronts. You're looking at what's the legal advisory opinion to keep fossil fuels in the ground? How are we campaigning to ensure this message gets out there? And how are we building a safe and dignified future for our people and our children? And whether that community is our village, our country, or across the region or globally, we are building resilience across all these spaces. And that's all I have to share with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alici, and thank you for your passion as well and for the great work that you're doing. I would like now to go on and pass the floor to Erwin. Erwin, what do you think, why is it important for children and young people to be taken seriously as we advance the implementation of global frameworks, including the Sendai framework for DRR and the SDGs 2030?
Okay, Anna, thank you so much. Okay, maybe I would like to introduce myself first. Hello, everyone. I'm Erwin from Indonesia, part of Young People Action Team, UNICEF East Asia and Pacific. I'm 22 years old, and I have been deployed in 7 emergency responses, such as flood, earthquake, cyclone, and volcano eruption. As a young humanitarian worker, I have a lot of opportunities to implementing psychosocial programs, DRR, and giving me more opportunities to support young people's engagement in emergency situation. I was raised and born in country where we face disaster most of the time. Nothing should stop me from learning how to tackle this issue and best way to mitigate and adapt. Based on the data from Indonesia Disaster Agency, from 2020 to 2022, there were 10,000 disasters that impacted 12 million Indonesian people, including children and young people. Young children are especially vulnerable because of this stress and trauma can affect their growth, development, and long-term health and well-being. In addition, early childhood development or ECD in emergency is not getting attention at all. Supporting young children and their caregiver are essential to ending preventable newborn, under 5 deaths, and fostering healthy brain development. It's also a key part of helping communities recover from crisis, breaking off cycle of poverty, violence, building peaceful and resilient societies. But regardless the situation, children and young people represent more than half population world, and also a group that can teach their communities how to reduce the risk and impact of disaster, as well as to accelerating to achieve SDGs and Sendai framework for DRR. Therefore, children and young people should be a part and parcel of any disaster resilient, climate adaptation, and sustainable development process. Because children and young people are the first is leader. I want to share with you the story of best practice from Indonesia of youth lead initiative in accelerating SDGs and SFDRR. I, with my organization, initiated DRR in school program that called in Bahasa Indonesia 1001 Sekolah Siaga Gempa or School-Based Earthquake Preparedness. In this program, we prepare children and young people to have knowledge, capacity, and participation in reducing disaster risks and preparing for disaster. So far, this program has reached 7 schools and 1 village in Bandung, West Java, Indonesia, with 2013 children and young people, 100 teachers, and form 6 disaster preparedness club, and making 16 peer champion. The second, children and young people are change maker and communicator. Children and young people also have power to act and mobilize others. The best practice is that I initiated climate change campaign and risk communication and community engagement for COVID-19 response through an online campaign. This program has impacted 965,000 children and young people who raise awareness about climate change and how to maintain mental health during COVID-19 pandemic. 160 climate change education content were created, and more than 500 children and young people are involved in this program as volunteers, and 40 youth lead organizations have collaborated. And the third, children and young people are innovators. Besides bringing fresh perspective, children and young people often have direct knowledge of insight into issues that are not accessible to adults. For example, we in UNICEF Indonesia Youth Network give innovation to the U-Report platform and created a creative chatbot related to the SDGs. Based on the best practice that I have told, children and young people are critical agent of change in accelerating SFDRR and SDGs point 11, 13, and 17. Mainstreaming children and young people in risk reduction need to be at the core of action to accelerate climate change action and achieving SDGs. Thank you so much. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Erwin. That was great, very clear. And again, thank you for your passion and for the great work that you're doing. I would like now to pass the floor to Tyrion Thomas for closing remarks. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of the time that we've been allotted, and we haven't been able to solve some connectivity problems. So Tyrion, over to you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. So it's really been so refreshing to listen to the panelists and the young people, despite the challenges that we've had with connectivity, in framing some of the critical issues that are necessary as we look at how we can realize the SDGs in a very, very short while, in just about 7 years, as someone pointed out, through particularly the action that we have for working with very, very young children, early childhood development, and the larger, broader issue of ending violence against children. There was a very useful reference to a term called human well-being, which Dr. Adrian used in his presentation. And that in some sense is the core of what World Vision defines as its vision and mission, which is really about ensuring well-being for every child and the most vulnerable child whom we serve. And this, we try to define it and quantify it in just 4 ways to make it simpler, to make it a little more concrete, which is about access to health and nutrition, to being educated for life, to being protected, and particularly in our context when we look at violence against children, from exploitation and harm, child labor, child marriage, physical abuse, sexual abuse, being forms of how violence against children is perpetrated, and the larger issue of resilience, of how children are able to grow in an environment or in a community or in a family where they can grow to their full potential, protected from shocks, whether they are environmental, climate change, or social pressures, or of different kinds. And so that that is really the element of what one would look at in terms of measuring success as to what we have achieved for our children, and particularly for the most vulnerable child and the most vulnerable communities going forward. And by its very nature, it is complex, as we have seen even as we looked at how ECD as a key driver towards sustainable development, or the conversation or the work that SAIEVAC is doing in trying to get people together. Shows that it is multi-sectoral. It has an array of stakeholders, whether it's government, whether it's private sector, whether it's CSOs, whether it's multilateral and bilateral organizations, and a whole range, and communities and families, I mean, coming together in this endeavor. And I think that is what makes it complex. We have even seen organizing an event of this kind can be so complex when there are multiple stakeholders, and we've started doing that fairly well in the period during COVID, because there was no other choice, and it became easier for us to do it. But nonetheless, going beyond events to actual action on the ground, we've seen it so complex when we try and get everyone together. And I think this is really a wake-up call for all of us when we did this work with the SACG and with the ILO in getting together the voices of children and young people, in looking at the whole issue of child labor itself. And we saw the remarkable output that the children have produced as a result of it. The kind of work that went together in getting it all together and putting it all together. And we really know that at the end of the day, it takes a whole range of stakeholders to come together in very, very, very concerted collective action to make this possible. And it is, as Dr. Adrian said, doing many things simultaneously, continuously, to make sure that at the end of the day, this dream will be realized. And I think that's the direction for us as we go forward. That we work together, we reach out, and I'm very sure that when we all work together as various stakeholders who work towards this common end, we will be able to reach the goals that we have set for ourselves, for humanity as a whole. So thank you all so much for this time, and in particular, my own thanks to the young people. And it's so great to hear the voices of young people. Again, in World Vision, we believe that we need to hear their voices. They should be a part of our own decision-making processes, and increasingly it is becoming so. People are being measured in terms of how young people are engaged in configuring programs and taking crucial decisions, on various things. And so I think that I think is very, very important, and I'm really glad that all of us have been able to do so. It's been a very short, quick time that we've had to listen to these voices, but I'm sure that these conversations and these platforms will be available for young people going forward in the future as well. So thank you all very much for this opportunity and for the ability to actually just host this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chirian, and thank you for your great closing remarks. I'm just going to pass the floor on to Deborah. She's going to send us off. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Thank you, Chirian, for the closing remarks, and thank you to all of you, each one of you. Thank you to Najat, so good to see you. Thank you to Rinchen from Bhutan. We all envy you. I'm talking from the heat in Bangkok today. Adrian, it's very good to get to hear your remarks. Abdullah, I hope the line will be better next time. There will be a next time. Thank you, Prenusa. Thank you, Alisi. Thank you, Erwin. I used to work in your country. I used to work in Indonesia. Thank you for coming together. Thank you to the UNICEF colleagues as well, and all the other colleagues from World Vision and ARNEC that made today's event possible. We're all in the same business. We are working to make the world a better place. And we were reminded today, this means working across the whole life cycle. It has to start with early childhood, that's connected with the adolescence of their future parents, that's connected with the youth, that's connected with the planet in which we live, that's connected with being mindful of the crisis surrounding us. We heard it loud and clear that 2030 is across the corner. This is the moment to accelerate. This is the moment to put all the